So what's so funny? Well, you know, we're each in a different place as far as humor goes, aren't we? Like, there's nothing funny about COVID, so we have to search for things that really do make us smile. And all of these statements are very true. We know we feel better when we smile and laugh and chuckle and rib each other and so on. It's a better feeling at the end of an evening if we know we've had a few, even if they're not belly laughs, but smiles and made us think again. So yes, this is practice for you now. I know you're wearing masks, some of you, but I can tell if your eyes are crinkling or not. So let's everybody practice just a smile. Very good. Some are a bit fake, but that's what about a chuckle? Right, okay. What about yeah, well, good work at that one. I nearly had someone come with me who, well, nearly, she wasn't feeling well herself, but she has a way of, when she's telling a story, partway through, she's laughing so hard, you can't even understand what the story is because she's at the punchline in her head and still working us up to it. So here we have young Carolyn Carskadden. This is her father's prize-winning pig. I wondered just which was the most valuable to him. I suspect that pig was a lot of pork chops, for example, and but no, that's the pig that went to the winter fair and won many local fair prizes and so on. Always makes me smile. That is a fair-size hog, would you say? Yes, fair size. Now take a good look at Elsie here. What do you see over her head?
Chandelier.
What's with that? What's with the chandelier? So where do you think dear Elsie is? Of somebody, yes. She's at the Royal York. She was trained, apparently she was trained, I think there's somebody always scooping behind her, but anyway, she was trained to go up elevators and escalators and to stay on display. There was always a fenced area and fresh straw, and I guess it was quite leading edge then to have Elsie, sometime 2 calves with her, and a local Churchill man. He was in charge of Elsie, and he took her here, there, and everywhere. So here we are at the Royal York. She was an Innisfil cow, by the way. I should just throw that in. And look at the nose on that, would you? Now, is anyone a farmer here? They probably know this better than I, if you have farming background. But what does that tag represent? A lot of information, a lot of statistics on that tag. The line, the lineage of the cow, the who sired, and so on. And no matter if she ends up in China or the U.S., everything is revealed on that tag. So I always get a little chuckle out of looking at that snout. Now here we have the party line. And you can only imagine the kerfuffle that can occur with a party line. Anyone here experienced on the party line? Now, did any of you ever snoop to listen?
It was tempting.
It was tempting, yes. Well, I think there must have been times I did or I heard that possibly happened. This is Robert Kell, and this is his 80th birthday morning, and this is what he did to celebrate his 80th birthday. He loaded up that wagon. Now, surely we could have thought of something better than that for him to do, something, but knowing the Kell family, I can see this would suit him right well, yes. So that's his happy birthday. Now, John Duncan was a proud farmer in Innisfil, a lot of these stories and photos were gathered when we worked on the farms of Innisfil book. And really, it's just the best way to get all the inside stories. So John was very, very deaf, and his hair is actually short there. He had long, flowing white hair. I think around that time when he knew I was coming to interview him, he had his hair cut. Anyhow, he had lived on his farm for, well, you can tell, since 1832. So how many generations of Duncans were there on that farm? Tremendous old fella, and you can almost picture what it was like the day I interviewed him. He's as deaf as anything, and I thought I should just yell and enunciate and really try to project what I needed to know from him. Finally he said, "Could you sit back there further? You're too much." You're too much. So we did get all the main points covered though, and we have a great story in the farms book. Now I love this story of Susan Molyneux Cooper. So in 1840, Susan married Matthew Cooper, and they moved to Canada, in fact to the 4th line of Innisfil. And she was not impressed at all with Innisfil or with Canada or any of this immigration process. She, so the story goes, did not unpack her trunk full of treasures for 3 full years. I mean, there were too many mosquitoes, there were snakes, she hadn't experienced snakes before, skunks, no, she hated skunks, she just generally didn't like the whole situation. However, things do change, as you know, and here we have, 50 years later, she unpacked her trunk. That's all I can say. She unpacked the trunk. I think there were 8 children, and this is the children, the grandchildren. They are seated on both ends, and it's just a tremendous recollection. Now, this dear lady, not my namesake exactly, but anyway, Elizabeth Quantz Wice was one of, sometimes I wonder if I should laugh at this at all, but anyway, you can decide. She was one of 19, and she was the mother of 13. Really, I don't see a halo around her head or anything, but she was quite the lady to help others. She had such a kindly nature. It's told that if someone had needed a compress or something that required various measures of this and measures of that, she was the lady to go to. She could help you create what you needed. However, my husband has a saying, something like, "You're starting to look kind of great-great-great-great-grandma Wice-ish." But I'd say maybe she didn't have a lot to smile about, I don't know. And so the story goes that if you sat for a photo in those days, it was quite a process. It wasn't like your instant camera, was it? It was, you had to sit there and grimace almost, probably. Ah, bathing suits. Don't you want to be captured for all time in a bathing suit, really? So here's what, I think that's, the 18 one is the one that's just below it, and those are more like middies, I think. Is that the right word? It's kind of got the collar and more detail to it. And here's a picture of some wild Killarney beach ladies. Look at that. That looks a bit more like the rubber cap era, and yeah. And I do have their names, but one thing one of the grandchildren said, "Please don't tell that's my grandmother. Just leave that out." This is a great little story. Frances Hindle of Cookstown. She was, I would guess, say 7 or 8 at the time this incident happened. I had the privilege to work with Joan McLean of Cookstown, completing her book. So from Joan and then from a lot of other people from Cookstown, they wanted their stories told. So there's actually 2 Cookstown books available. But this is the Hindle story. And I gather Frances's mother it was baking day. You know, she's busy. There were things to be done, this to be rolled out, this to be put in the oven. And she had no time for Frances. And anybody know Frances? She is a go-getter. Like even then, I see how this all unfolded. So she went off with her wagon, and she happily collected as many milk bottles as she could find in the neighborhood. Now, the milk bottles were all set out because it was milk delivery day. So, an hour later, she comes trotting along with this wagon load of bottles and says, "Mom, look, look." Well, I don't know if things burned in the oven that day or what, but all those bottles had to be returned. Well, you can imagine how easy that was. Not easy at all. So anyway, that's their story that, you know, there's ways to demand attention. She should have got her attention. Now this is taken on Highway 11. It's not too much of a traffic jam really, is it? But it is the traffic heading south, heading back to the city. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch that you could call it a traffic jam, but I understand that the first police officer in Cookstown, his regular Sunday job was counting the cars that went through Cookstown. I don't exactly know why he was counting the cars. Was it to prove a point that it was busy, that it was, you know, he was needed there in case? Anyhow, that's your traffic jam for you. I'm just going to take a little sip here. This is quite a photo. It was taken in 2 sections, and what was being dedicated was the cairn that's just kind of behind off to the right there, and there were actually gates, but I don't think that's very visible. So definitely a community celebration, because the choir, the St. James Church wouldn't have had that many people in it at that time. But the interesting part, and you'll never be able to figure where he is, but an older gentleman came to me one day. He was to be giving me his life story, and he had this burden of guilt he was carrying around, he said. So when that photo was taken, he was over on the left-hand side, one of the little boys in there. But, he said, I'm in that photo twice. Because while they were setting up to take the second half, he rushed around and got in the second half. But he said, Donna, you're the only one who knows this. I've never told anyone else. I love that. Now, when you're working on a book title, and we went through the process of interviewing a lot of people and getting a lot of stories about veterans of Innisfil, meaning anyone who had been in World War II, man, woman, we collected stories. And this was one of the proposed titles, The Fighting Men and Women of Innisfil. Well, wouldn't you think I was talking about the divorce rate or something? Like, what has that got to do? So we had to defeat that, even though there was a group who wanted that, and the title was Innisfil Veterans, Their Lives and Memories. This is a very fine man. He is deceased now. But George, I met him when he was 90-ish, And he was very involved at that point in his life, delivering Meals on Wheels to local people. But George was in the Air Force in World War II. He was a mechanic, an airplane mechanic. And he was explaining to me that he had to often go up in airplanes. He had to be present when there was somebody telling him there was this knock, knock, knock sound or ping or whatever it was. And he would have to go up. But he was been told time and time again, George, you have to jump out of the plane soon in your parachute. We have to test you for that. And he kept refusing. And they never forced him. I said, well, George, what was the problem? He said, why would I want to do something that if you don't get it right the first time, there's never a second chance? Well, he has a point, doesn't he? So, anyhow, that was his claim to fame. Gadsden, yes. Bill Gadsden. Bill and Elaine Gadsden lived in Cookstown. And they chose Cookstown, I guess Elaine was looking for a smaller community. Bill was looking, he was an English teacher. He was looking for a place where he felt needed. So he said, they came up browsing through Cookstown, picked up a newspaper. Here's what he saw. They need me, he says. They really need me. Yes. It is a good one, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, they really need me. Now, there's probably lots of photos similar to this, but that's my mother in the back row as the teacher. Now, this is exactly the photo I was looking for. There is a photo that has, I think it's vertical stripes in material. So you can tell that the mother of 6 children, the boys had little striped shirts, the girls had little striped dresses. It stands out so beautifully, but this is not the photo. However, I did want to tell you about this particular situation. My mom's first teaching job was in 1939, and World War II had just been declared the Labor Day weekend. And she said the kids were as good as gold. That didn't last, but for 4 or 5 days that first week, everyone was so, stunned, kind of. Their parents were afraid, the kids were afraid. They just didn't know what this all meant. Well, again, it didn't last that long. So the tallest boy in the back row, and Ivan Browning is his name, because he is still living. He lied about his age, and he enlisted in World War II. So when we did the Veterans book release, he had phoned me and he wanted to know, because he knew my mother was still living and he knew that she used to be Miss Spring. He wanted to meet Miss Spring, and so we set that up. And he said to her, Miss Spring, now she was hard of hearing too, he was as well, but anyway, they did manage to get a conversation going. He said to her, I want to tell you something that I'm really ashamed about. She didn't know what he was referring to. Well, anyway, the way school bells go in those days, it'd be on a long rope. Well, one week in September, well, maybe over the weekend, Ivan came to the school and cut off a foot on the rope. So she couldn't reach it. So apparently it was quite a sight to see Miss Spring jumping up and down, trying to get a hold of the bell to call them in. And that's what he confessed to. Well, she looked at him. Well, it's darn well time you confessed then, she said. Oh dear. Now this is a water tower store just outside of Cookstown. And apparently a group of, I was going to say ne'er-do-wells, but whatever, they were up to some shenanigans. And it took 6 of them to paint that. So they each had a section, and they climbed up, and they got that all painted on, Hooterville. Well, of course, there were a lot of people very up in arms about it. This has got to be accounted for. I mean, who could have done this? I think it's so-and-so, and no, maybe it's those bad boys from Beaton, or like, who knows what they were thinking. Anyhow, it remained unsolved until 40 years later. I was doing a presentation at Cookstown School, and I think it was their 40th anniversary, not quite sure. Doing a little chit chat about things to do with the Cookstown area. And it was solved. This, in the back row in this one grade 7 class, it was this little kerfuffle. And it turned out this young man had heard this story in his own home. He knew who was part of it. So he proceeded to slip me the goods, you know, who there was. He knew a couple of the names. He didn't know them all. So for the Cookstown history book, these men, look at them, they were rowdy. You could tell, right? Just looking at them. One of them, the man on the front on the left, is Paul Wardlaw. He was a counselor at the time. I said to him, gosh, you know, this is not proper. I'm sure that you did this. Well, anyhow, it was a confession that was made. You notice how good I am at drawing up confessions? Like, this is kind of a thread here, isn't it? So that was fun. Now, when you see a sign like this, it says, "Beware of dog, eats tires." Do you believe it? I didn't. I regretted it though, because this is Boris Horodinsky's tire-eating dog, and yes, he had my 2 front tires punctured in seconds. In seconds. He just, I mean, jaws on him. But the thing about having someone like Boris, the dog, do that, I got new tires out of it. So anyhow, yes, he had flattened my tires pretty quickly. Now this is Potato Farmer. I'm just gapping. It's a potato name you'd know too, but anyhow. And this is my pal Doug Brewster. And really the story was about potatoes, so that's why when Doug was telling me some of his, and he loves a good story. I mean, just look at that face. You know he loves a good story. So he was explaining how hard everybody worked on digging all their potatoes in the fall, and I guess potatoes are all dug now, aren't they? Maybe?
Oh, yeah.
And how his father was particularly proud of this potato crop he had. He had probably 20 or 30 bags of potatoes, and it happened, the man came along and said, "I'll give you $5 for each bag." Well, Doug's dad had $8 in mind. Excuse me. He had $8 in mind, so no way was he going to sacrifice his potatoes. So Doug said Doug, had to haul the potatoes down to the basement, every darn bag, every one. In the spring, you can imagine potatoes, how they get in the spring. Had to haul them back up. They were miserable. He had got 50 cents a bag for them then. So Lesson learned? I'm not sure. Claire Rogers was an interesting man, Sandy Covert. I'd heard that there was a man who was 104 who lived in Sandy Cove, so I just had to track him down. We were doing this section on oldest citizens of Innisfil. So I had a good chat with Claire. He was definitely one of the first in that Sandy Cove retirement section. He even commuted to Toronto for many years. So, but I loved his Sandy Cove time. Sorry. Too much talking, eh? Another drink. Anyway, I wanted to get his photo, but he would have none of it. He would tell his story. He didn't have much to say about Innisfil, but he would not allow his photo to be taken. Well, I pled with him. Oh, everybody's getting. No, he's been married 5 times. He wasn't going to let any of his wives know where he was. So, not going to happen. Not going to happen. Because this is a long story, I think I'll skip this locked. But I'll cut to the punchline. We have a book room in Knox School. Have most of you seen where Knox School is? And so it's in quite good shape, and we're the prime, Innisfil Historical's the prime tenants. But it has a tricky little basement, tricky. It has a locked room for books. I got locked in the basement. You know, the click behind me was ominous when I got into the, there is another exit, but that particular winter, it had been jammed shut with ice that slid off the roof. So there I am. I can get the door where the ice jammed, I can get it open about 2 inches. I cannot squeeze through 2 inches. Anyhow, I cast my panic aside. I tried to, think through this clearly. Of course, my keys, my phone, everything were upstairs. I was wearing a red scarf, and there was a broom nearby. So I poked the red scarf out. I'm waving and yelling. Well, and then my voice got hoarse like this. And my second attempt, it's about an hour later after I'd sat down and cried for a while, I got back up. All right, Donna, I'm not going to defeat you. You're gonna... Anyway, there was a fire extinguisher nearby. So I thought, not that there was a fire, but maybe I could just like send poofs at somebody, it would catch poofs. And so that's what I did. But anyway, nobody stopped, so that didn't work. So I sat down and cried again. Then I thought I had the door open just a bit, and I thought I saw somebody running up the hill. So I immediately go into crazy yelling mode, and he does hear me. And where are you? Where are you? Because he couldn't figure out where this voice was coming from. So, long story, finally short, I explained to him, you have to come in such a way, and you come down. So he comes in, he opens the door, and I fall on his chest and hug him, and he's patting me on the head. There. And anyway, so I could write about it, I could talk about it. I went home, my husband was still where I'd left him 3 hours before, watching curling or something on the TV. Oh, hi, you're home. Okay, I went to bed and slept for a while, got up, and then gave him a blast about where I'd been. But, oh yes, anyway, that's the situation. In our farms, or no, it's our recent 2020 history book, I really enjoyed this story by Rob Henry. He ended his story about farming. You know, he's the new generation. He's a man in his 50-ish, I guess, or late 40s. And he thanked his parents at the end of his write-up for all those hours spent cleaning out stalls and all that. And how proud he was of his son Braden, and that's Braden leaning against the bale. And it was really touching, I thought, for him to speak about passing these certain skills and habits on to his son. Well, then, it was probably 15 minutes later, the tractor and the baler went up in smoke. Now, I would have liked a quote from him at that point, because he said this was his favorite tractor, and his son was driving it, and, you know, all the things that he might have said at that point. But anyway, no loss of life, no problems, but I smile about it. Now, this is more or less the end of my presentation. Someone gave me this photo, no story attached. So I thought maybe you could give me some ideas as to what not that I fake any stories, don't get me wrong. Everything I tell you is the truth. But here's one that I think could be a story. What do you think I could say about that? It's not clear, it's not really clear, is it? But little boy, looks like his hands are clasped in some way, and that is the old Painswick School. What do you think my storyline might be?
What did he do?
Before,
Is there a teacher standing there looking at him, or is the little boy?
He punished him.
Okay, he's been sent out there and he's, okay.
Locked his teacher in the basement.
Following along on that theory, yes.
Oh, stuck some pigtail in the inkwell.
Is this the voice of experience talking? Yes, there has to be something to be said about that, doesn't there? And my son was looking at it and said, oh, he's just wet his pants. He's just standing there. He wonders if he should run home or not.
But why the picture? Yeah, there's got to be a
Yes,
reason
yes,
why.
there has to be,
Yeah.
yes. So I guess the moral of all this chit-chat is that you should watch out for who's taking your picture and what the reason, or maybe they're going to make up a reason, who knows. But that's one thing I enjoy about looking at people's photos is you can turn something around to make it a very positive experience or a very entertaining experience. So I challenge you to look at pictures in a new way. Thank you.